Well, good morning, church. It is indeed good to be with you this morning. And a special welcome to all of our fathers this morning. We're glad that you were here and hope that you feel honored and appreciated. Special note to my dad, who watches each Sunday from California. Happy Father's Day, Dad. I love you. And I will look forward to talking to you later this afternoon. I also want to pause for just a minute and to say something about what's going on in the world around us. It just feels like a lot right now, doesn't it? It just feels heavy. It just feels like the world is on fire with what's going on in the Middle East, what's going on in Southern California, in Minnesota, in a country where we've got protests and parades. Here in our congregation, we've got people that we love, that we sit beside each Sunday, that are dealing with difficult diagnosis, that are going through divorce. It just seems like a lot. My wife Kelly and I were having coffee yesterday morning, and we made the comment, it just feels like the world's on fire. And I'm thankful on a day like today for a place that we can come and be safe, where we can be genuine, where we can be authentic, and we can admit that we are struggling, that we are having a hard time living in this world right now. That we can admit that the world's on fire and that we smell like smoke. And so I'm thankful for a place that we can come and be honest. And we can rely on one another, we can lean into one another, and we can find strength and comfort in one another's presence. And so I'm thankful for you, University Christian Church, for being that community of faith for me and for so many others as we pray for the world. So this morning we are starting a sermon series that we're calling The Power of Words. Words have power, we all know that, the power to do good, but also the power to do evil. With our words we can insult or we can encourage. We can curse or we can bless. We can use our words to build people up or tear people down. Our words have the power to strengthen relationships. And our words have a power to destroy relationships. That's what this 4-week series is going to be all about. We're going to look at the power of our words and how we might use them not to harm but to build up, to give life. So this morning, we're going to talk about sort of our everyday lives, the way in which we use our words to bring life. Next week, we're going to talk about the use of words in our families. Healthy families, dysfunctional and toxic families. The week after that, we're going to look at the power of words to either divide our nation or unite it. And then the last week, we're going to talk about our prayers. We're going to talk about the words that we use to talk about and to God, but also the words that God speaks to us. And so that's sort of the arc of this series over the next 4 weeks. So this morning, we're going to look at 2 texts as we begin this series. The first is from the Epistle of James, and I have to tell you that's one of my favorite books of the Bible. And part of the reason that I like it so much is unlike a lot of the other epistles, like a lot of the other letters that are written, this one doesn't have a lot of heavy theology. Really, its focus is on how to live out one's faith. It's much more of a practical how-to. Right? It talks about how to put our faith to work. The second text that you'll hear is from Paul's letter to the church in Ephesus. And I'll talk a little bit more about that on the other side. For now, I invite you to hear these words from James and from Paul.
Today's reading comes from the 3rd chapter of James and also Ephesians. Here are the readings. From James chapter 3, verses 7 through 10. For every species of beast and bird, of reptile and sea creature can be tamed and has been tamed by the human species. But no one can tame the tongue, a restless evil full of deadly poison. With it, we bless the Lord and Father, and with it, we curse those who are made in the likeness of God. From the same mouth come blessing and cursing. My brothers and sisters, this ought not to be so. And from Ephesians chapter 4, verse 29, let no evil talk come out of your mouths, but only what is useful for building up as there is need, so that your words may give grace to those who hear. Here ends the reading. The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God.
So that second text, the one from Ephesians, is going to be sort of a thread that runs through this entire series. We'll come back to that time and again. And maybe a little context might help, because Paul is writing this letter from prison, presumably in Rome, and he is awaiting the outcome of his trial to find out if he's going to be executed because of his faith or whether he'd be given a chance to live. And he's writing back from the prison cell to Ephesus. He'd spent about 25 months in Ephesus. He founded a church there and then went on to do other things. And as he left, they started turning in on one another. They started to fight with one another. They started using words that were less than godly. Is that a nice way to say that? And he has to write back to them to correct them, and he calls them back to unity. And he begins chapter 4 by saying, I, therefore, a prisoner in the Lord, I beg you to live a life worthy of the calling that you have received. He's saying to all of us that you have been called by God, you have been chosen, you have been set apart, you've been given a life, and I beg you, he says, to live a life worthy of that calling. And then he spends the rest of the chapter sort of explaining what a life like that looks like. He unpacks it, and most of what he says has a lot to do with our tongues, with our lips, with what we say. He says things like, be humble, be gentle, be patient. Speak the truth, he says, but do it in love. He says, put off falsehoods. Apparently they were lying to one another, and he says, I want you to be honest with one another. He tells them not to sin when they're angry. Notice that he doesn't say, don't get angry. He understands and recognizes that we're all going to get angry from time to time. The call, he says, as people of faith, is to not sin when we get angry. And then he said that line that we heard a moment ago, let no evil talk come out of your mouths, but only what is good for building up, as there is need, so that your words may give grace to those who hear. Now that word evil there is sapros in Greek. And interestingly enough, it refers to food that has gone bad, that's spoiled, that's gone rotten. That's the analogy that he uses in talking about words that are evil. Let me see if I can give you an example of this. Years ago, when my twins, that are now almost 23, were about 4 or 5 years old, we were going someplace in the car, and I gave them each a sippy cup with chocolate milk. And as we got to wherever it is that we were going, when we arrived, there was only one sippy cup. You all know where this is going. About 2 weeks later, I found the other sippy cup. It had rolled under the seat and was putrid. It was gross. Now, church, here's what you need to know. I'm a gagger, and it was not pretty at all. And it was really bad. But that's the image that Paul wants us to have when we think about those evil words. Evil talk is talk that is putrefied. It's wretched. It's nasty. It's rotten. But then in the second half of the verse, he says to turn it around. He says, use only words that build up. In other words, the inverse is that those evil words tear people down. Use words that build people up. He says, may your words give grace to those who hear. The word there, grace, is the word charis in Greek. It has to do with kindness, with love, with forgiveness that is undeserved. And so he says, I want you to let your words give kindness, to give love that is undeserved. Now, the reason that we're doing this series, of course, is that because I'm willing to bet that it applies to all of us, that all of us struggle from some time or other to use words that build up and not just tear down. I have to confess that I struggle with this from time to time, and I trust that you do as well. In fact, I would argue that Paul and James wouldn't have to write these things if it weren't part of the human condition, that we all have this tendency. We all have this tendency that humans struggle with of allowing evil talk to come out of our mouths. Now, how many of us were taught as children, sticks and stones may break our bones, but words will never hurt me? How many of us heard that when we were children? How many of us know that to be a complete lie and falsehood? Right? We all have been taught that, and we all know that it is not true because we've all been hurt by the words of others. I thought of somebody this week that I haven't thought of in 30 years. His name was Mark Coonan, and he was in my 5th grade class. And I don't remember a whole lot about Mark, and I have no idea what ever happened to him. I tried to find him on social media, but I couldn't find him. But what I remember about Mark is that he was brilliant. He was the smartest one in our class, but he was socially awkward. He was kind of a mess. Physically, appearance, he never combed his hair. He was a bit of a mess. His desk had papers flowing out. He was a bit of a mess. And he was the brunt of just about every joke in 5th grade. He was the result, he was on the receiving end of just about every harsh comment that any bully could ever say. Now, I hope to this day, however many years later it is, that I didn't participate in that. I don't think that I did, and I hope that I didn't. But one thing I know for sure is that I didn't stand up for him. I didn't ever say to the bullies, hey, guys, give him a break. I never stood up for him, in part because I was afraid that if I did, that they would turn their attention and start teasing me. I'm willing to bet that you can probably think of your own Mark in your story. That sort of thing continues to happen to this day, doesn't it? And for some reason, it starts to get even worse. In middle school, it takes on a harsher tone. And today, especially in today's social media atmosphere, we hear this sort of thing all the time, stories of kids who can only take so much. You see, words have power. Words have the power to crush, to make people feel hopeless and helpless. And that's what evil words look like. Sapros, putrid, rotten. So here's what I would say to our kids that are here this morning, to kids that are part of this community, and that is, I'm begging you. I'm begging you to be different than the other kids. I'm asking you, I'm begging you to stand up, to speak out for the other kids who struggle standing up for themselves. For all the people like Mark who tend to be on the end of the bullying and the teasing. But the other thing that I would say is that if you are the one being bullied, if you are the one being teased, that it may not feel like it right now, but you are going to make it. You are going to be okay. And that there are lots and lots of people who were picked on early in life that went on to become wildly successful. Many of them ended up developing this heart of compassion in part because of what they went through as a child. And they went on to become the type of people who were leaders. There's tons of examples. For instance, Justin Timberlake. He was called a sissy when he was in school because he didn't like football. Instead, he was more interested in the arts. He said a while back, I was an outcast in a lot of ways. But this is the part that I liked. He said, but everything that you get picked on for when you are young is essentially going to make you sexy when you are older. Michael Phelps, one of the greatest swimmers of all time, he won 22 Olympic medals, was picked on incessantly growing up because he had a lisp and he had big ears. But now he says, when I go back to my hometown, a lot of those bullies, they're still there. And a lot of them are bussing tables at the restaurants that I go to. And they always ask for my autograph. Taylor Swift, some of you have probably heard of her before. She was picked on in middle school because she liked country music. But those bullies only inspired her to start writing songs. In fact, she wrote a song about it called Mean that propelled her career and helped make her who she is today. There are countless examples of people who have overcome harsh words said to or about them. And you will too. You know, I was reminded of something that Jesus once said that we all need to hear regardless of our age, and that is, what fills the heart comes out of the mouth. What fills the heart comes out of the mouth. Another way to say that is, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. In other words, whatever's coming out of your mouth is a sign of what's going on in your heart. And then oftentimes when we speak down, when we criticize others, isn't it because more often than not that we feel weak about ourselves? And so we try to make ourselves feel better by putting other people down. We try to make ourselves feel bigger by making other people small, by comparing ourselves to others, by talking about their failures and their shortcomings so that we can make ourselves feel a little more secure. You see, I would argue that so often our words are a sign of something wrong in us, not the person that we are criticizing. Sadly, we tend to carry those tendencies with us into adulthood and need to put others down in order to make ourselves feel better. And sometimes it's to their faces, but more often than not, it's behind the scenes. It's in anonymous messages or notes or words that we say to others about someone else. And interestingly enough, this whole notion, this idea of gossip and slander, it runs through Scripture, and in theology they refer to it as the sin of detraction. As the sin of detraction, that when we say these things, it detracts from their character and it detracts from ours. Thomas Aquinas referred to these things, gossip, slander, sin of detraction. These are mortal sins, he says. They separate you from God. And I would argue that sometimes we don't even realize it, that it almost becomes second nature to us. I read an article this last week in Psychology Today about how you can say something to somebody else about someone else before this person ever has a chance to meet the other person, and what you say, it sticks, for good or for evil. You may say to somebody who's not met Tom, yeah, have you met Tom? Tom's a great guy. You'll really like Tom. And sure enough, when they meet Tom, they like Tom. In the same way that if you were to say, have you not met Tom? Tom's a good guy, but he's a little bit unreliable. That sure enough, when they meet Tom, they may like him a little bit, but they're sure not going to trust him. And what was the reason that he's unreliable? Well, 10 years ago, he didn't return my phone call. And now, that little but has determined his character to somebody else. Those are the things. Those are the things, Paul says. Everything after the but is sapros. So be careful what you say. I've said those things before, and I'm guessing you have too, and it poisons the well, it plants the seed about their character, about their life. There's a great story that's told by St. Philip of Neri, who's a 16th century priest. And a woman came to him and asked for confession. And in the midst of that confession, she confessed to being a bit of a gossip, that she had been saying things about people all over town. And she felt bad about it. And she asked, "So, Father, what's my penance? What do I have to do in order to earn forgiveness?" Well, Father Neri sent her home, said, "Go home and get a pillow and bring it back to me." She was a little confused, but decided to do what was told, and she went home and she got a pillow. When she came back, he took her up to the top of the bell tower of the church and tore open the pillow, took all of the feathers in the pillow and threw them out of the bell tower. The wind took them and they went all throughout the city. Father Philip said, "Now, your penance is to go pick up every feather." She said, "Well, that's impossible." And he said, "Precisely. Just as the things that you said about those people spread all over town, you can't get those things back either." So let me ask you, do you ever speak unkindly? Do you speak uncharitably about other people? Have the but and what comes after that? Do you struggle with harsh words that cause pain, that tear people down? If so, today God is asking you to let no evil come out of your mouth. But notice too that that's only the first part of the verse. That he goes on to say that use words that build people up so that the words may give grace to those who hear. In other words, your tongue, your words are like a hammer. Are like a hammer, that you can use a hammer, you can beat and destroy and tear something apart, but at the same time, you can use a hammer to build as a tool to build something strong. Your words, your tongue is like a hammer. And so I want to encourage you to be intentional with the words that you use to build people up. To continually be asking yourself, what can I say? How can I build this person up? Because the truth is that everywhere you go, there are people that are struggling, that are hurting, and our call as people of faith is to build them up. Here at University Christian Church, we partner with Academy 4, which is a mentoring program, and we have adopted an elementary school not far from here, Alice Contreras. And one Friday a month, we have a group of folks from here in the congregation that does a one-on-one mentoring for every fourth grader in that school. It's a beautiful program. It's changed that school, and in a lot of ways, it's changed our church. And the whole curriculum is built upon leadership. And the curriculum is basically an acrostic for the words leader, and the first E represents encourage. And those of you who are mentors will remember that one of the things that they talk about, one of the things that we try to encourage our fourth graders to do is to fill other people's buckets, to use words to build people up, to encourage them, to use words that fill and build. So maybe we should pray every day, God, help me to encourage, to build people up, and help me to have the right words to say at just the right time to someone who really needs it. Audrey Hunt is a music teacher and a voice coach at a community college in Southern California. And she tells the story of a boy in her class one semester whose name was Edward. And Edward was, well, I can imagine he was a lot like Mark. He was unkempt. He was oftentimes a little bit socially awkward. He was always off by himself, sitting under a tree when she would see him outside of class. She knew something was going on with him, but didn't know what. She would always try to engage, try to talk, but he would barely even make eye contact. And unlike Mark, he was not a great student. In fact, he didn't try hard at all. He would turn in papers, and she'd read them, and she could tell that he could do better, that he wasn't trying hard enough. But she could also tell that he had more potential, and so she'd write, I think you have more ability than this. I think you can do better. Well, come the end of the semester, she was time to give the final exam, and at this point, he had earned a solid D. And she didn't want to give him a D, but teachers know you have to give what they earn, and so she was worried as she gave the final exam, hoping maybe that he would perform well and he would lift up his grade. But sure enough, when she graded the exam, it just made this D a little bit more solid. Well, at the end of finals week, she would invite all of her students to come to her office during office hours to pick up the final exam and to get their final grade. She was hoping that Edward would show up. He never came until just at the end when she was getting ready to go home. She was packing up her stuff. He kind of sheepishly walked in through her door. And before she could even start to speak, he spoke up first and said, "I know I didn't do very well in your class. I'm stupid. I'm a bad student, and I have been a disappointment to you. I've been an embarrassment to you. I know I got a bad grade in your class." And in that moment, her heart just broke. And she did something in that moment that she's never done before, she's never done since. And she said to him, looking him right in the eye, and said, "Edward, your grade in this class is an A." He said, I didn't earn an A. She said, "Edward, you may have been a D student, but you are an A human being. And I see potential in you. I believe in you." He walked out of that office a different person. Later that night, her phone rang. Late at night, it was the priest of the local church. And the priest said, "I'm sorry to call in the middle of the night, but I just needed to talk to you. I'm Edward's priest. And I want you to know that whatever you said to him today, it changed the trajectory of his life." You see, I was called to the family's home this afternoon because, well, when he left to go to school today, they found a note. And the note said, "Mom and Dad, I'm sorry I couldn't be the kind of son that you wanted me to be. All I ever wanted was to be loved, and I'm sorry that I was unlovable. I will go now. I'm sorry for any inconvenience I've caused. Please have my body cremated." Well, they sat, despondent, until finally Edward walked in the house, told them that he had changed his mind, that he wanted to live because of something, the priest said, because of something that you said. Well, Edward went on to become a dentist, and he's married in the family of 4. And that happened because of the power of words from one person who was paying attention and used her words to build somebody up just as there was need, whose words gave grace. So I want to invite you, I want to beg you to go out of your way this week to be that kind of a person, to be that kind of a Christian. To use your words to build people up. You know, Christians talk a lot about giving our hearts to Jesus. This week, I want to encourage you and invite you to beg you to give your tongue to Jesus and to allow him to use you each day to build people up and to speak words of grace. Amen? Amen.